Hey, in my last video, I talked about why you shouldn't wait for the perfect time to get started. But today, let's talk about what happens after you start and how to actually finish what you've begun through intentional goal setting and time management. Because here's the thing, starting is crucial, but completion, that requires an entirely different set of skills. And while that initial enthusiasm can carry you through the first few days or weeks, it's actually what you do after that excitement has worn off that really determines if you'll be successful or not. So let's talk about intentional time blocking first. This isn't just about putting something on your calendar, it's about treating that time with the same respect you'd give your most important client meeting. Now, when I was writing my book, I had to get serious about protecting certain hours of my day. If I didn't, other tasks would always seem to take priority. Let me show you how this works in practice. Instead of saying, I'll work on the book today, I'll block out specific times. It's usually my peak hours, and I treat them as non negotiable. This means turning off notifications, closing my email, and letting people know that I'm unavailable. So, if you had a meeting with your biggest client, you wouldn't let random interruptions derail it, right? Well, your most important work deserves that same level of protection. But here's where a lot of people get this wrong. They try to block out huge chunks of time, like 4 to 5 hours. Then they get frustrated when they can't maintain focus that long. Instead, I found that working 90 to 120-minute blocks during my peak hours, that's much more effective. It's long enough to get into deep work, but not so long that your energy completely drains. And when starting out, uh, you could use the Pomodoro technique of like 25 minutes if these blocks of 90 to 120 minutes are just too long. This brings me to something critical. You need to understand your best work hours. And we all have times during the day when we're naturally more focused and more productive. And for me, it's before lunch. I know that if I don't utilize those peak hours for my most important work, I'm essentially throwing my most productive time away. You need to identify when you do your best work, and then you need to fiercely protect those hours. Now, I don't schedule client calls or meetings until after lunch, and usually I'll start at 4 p.m. and work my way backwards. Now, you might be thinking, but Chad, I don't really know when my best hours are. And here's a simple way to kind of figure that out. So for the next 3 days, track when you feel most alert and focused. When do you naturally tackle complex problems? When do you find yourself getting into that flow state where work just feels easier? For most people, this is typically within the first few hours after they're fully awake, but not always. I know for me, when I was younger, it would be in the late nights, 10 p.m. until like 2 a.m. But here's the thing that most people miss. Your best hours may only be 2 to 3 hours a day, and that's normal. The key is recognizing that those hours are literally worth 2 to 3 times more than your other working hours in terms of what you can accomplish. And when I realized this, it completely changed how I structured my day. And I started focusing on where my energy was spent, and I made sure I was doing things that were important and energized me during those times. So let me give you a real example. When I'm working during my peak hours, I can write content that would normally take me 3 hours in just about an hour. And the quality is better and the ideas flow more naturally, and I make fewer mistakes that I need to fix later. But if I waste those hours on reactive tasks like checking email or answering unsolicited calls, I'm literally throwing away my most productive time. Now, I know some of you are thinking, yeah, but my job requires me to be available during certain hours, or I have too many client meetings to, handle that controls my schedule. And I understand. I faced a lot of the same challenges as a consultant. And the solution isn't to completely overhaul your schedule overnight, but you can start small and you can protect just one peak hour a day for your most important work. So ask yourself if you can just shift your schedule slightly to better align with your energy patterns. I would suggest starting next week and block out time for yourself. If other people can grab a spot on your calendar, you block it off first. Remember, it's not about working more hours. It's about getting more value from the hours you already have. And when you start treating your peak hours as your most valuable resource, you'll naturally become more protective of those hours. Now let's talk about realistic milestones. And I'll be transparent with you here. In my last video, I mentioned having my book done by January. And since then, last year, 2 days ago, I discovered some additional opportunities that will make the book even more valuable for my readers, but it requires me extending the timeline. And this is exactly what I want to talk to you about. It's the balance between pushing forward and the balance between being strategic. So when you set out to accomplish something big, you start with your best estimates, right? But as you get deeper into the work, you often discover new possibilities and complexities, and you couldn't have known about these at the start. Now, the key isn't to beat yourself up about adjusting the original deadline, but it is to make strategic decisions based off what you know now while keeping the momentum actually going. And this is actually a perfect example of what I mean by strategic progress versus just pushing through. Yes, we want to maintain momentum, but we also want to create the best possible value for our clients, for our audience. And sometimes that means adjusting our timelines to actually match reality. But you have to be honest with yourself that the reason for the change is real and not some procrastination tactic that you're deploying because of fear. So let me give you a practical way to balance progress and quality. I use what I call kind of this 2-pass method. And so during peak hours, focus purely on creation and forward momentum. Get your ideas out, write that code, design that system. Don't worry about perfection. But then during your non-peak hours, that's where you can go back and refine and you edit and you improve. And this way you're using your best energy for the heavy lifting and your regular energy for the polishing work. And this is exactly how I approached my book project. My peak hours were for writing new content and for, solving some complex problems. The editing and the formatting and the other supporting tasks, that happens during my regular working hours. And that maximizes what I can accomplish while maintaining quality and actually quantity. Now, that being said, if I wasn't going to have a professional editor, then I would need to use my best work hours to actually edit as well, because that would be the most important thing for me to accomplish. And I need to be fresh to get it done effectively. But as it stands, I can do my part of the editing in my normal hours. Now, starting is step one, but finishing is where the magic happens. It's about finding that sweet spot between taking action and being strategic with your time. And you need to do both. The courage to start and then the wisdom to see it through. Now, if you found this helpful, you'll definitely want to check out my next video. It's You're Closer to Success Than You Think. And I'll be diving deep into why you might be further along than you realize and how to actually capitalize on the progress that you've already made. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.